This episode of the BREWtally Speaking Podcast is brought to you by On Point Pomade. Keep your beard and hair looking on point with their line of pomades and beard oils over at onpointpomade.com. Use our code BSP15 at checkout and get 15% off your total purchase order. So thanks again to On Point Pomade for sponsoring our show. This episode is also sponsored by the Bean Bastard Coffee. Head over to thebeanbastard.com and pick up any one of their delicious hand-roasted coffees. Coffee lovers will also enjoy their hand-cut and handmade espresso candles and soaps as well. If you're in the Buffalo, New York area, head to their store located at 448 Elmwood Avenue. And thanks again to the Bean Bastard for supporting this show. Speaking Podcast is proudly sponsored by Rockabilia.com. With over 500,000 officially licensed items in their online store, you're guaranteed to find something you need. Use our code BREWtally and get 10% off your total purchase order. Now on to the show. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the BREWtally Speaking Podcast. I am your host, John, and this episode's guest is the returning Andrew Michael Wells of Eidola and Dance Gavin Dance. Eidola has a new record coming up on September 17th via Rise Records. It is called The Architect. I'm very excited for you all to hear it. Thankfully, I've already got an advanced copy of it, and it is damn impressive. If you are not familiar with Eidola or Andrew, well, then I guess you haven't checked out our other two episodes. Actually, scratch that. The only other episode I've done, I have one sitting in the vaults. We talk a little bit about that, but Andrew has become one of those people that I always love having on the show. I love just actually being friends with this dude. He is, in a day and age where, we know so much about our friends because of social media, it's really kind of refreshing to see, or lack of seeing, posts from Andrew because he's not on social media. And so it's one of those where getting to do something like this is kind of fun because it's an opportunity for me to talk to a friend of mine at length about some serious shit. Like, I don't think we've had a conversation, whether it be through text or in person or over doing one of these, where some real shit doesn't get said. And that's one of the things that I've always appreciated about the relationship that Andrew and I have is just the vulnerability to be open and honest. It's really fucking refreshing to have people in your life that become a source kind of for almost giving you permission to be equally as open and raw and vulnerable with people. I don't want to say it's a permission necessarily that Andrew or anyone gives us, but it's one of those things where it's hard not to see someone living a life that's so different from everybody else's, especially since we don't see it every day on social media. Like, here's the food I ate, or here's the place I went to, or whatever. It kind of makes you want to be more engaged with this person when you're talking to them. And I think Eidola's music really benefits from that as well. The band essentially doesn't post much. That's something that we have kind of talked about consistently over our chats. And I think it harkens back to a day, when both of us grew up. I'm a little bit older than Andrew, but where we didn't know everything about everyone or everything. And there was a sense of mystery. So whatever this band or whatever this person would allow you to see a glimpse into their life or their creative process, you kind of soaked it up and it meant more. And I think that's the thing about Eidola's music to me, is it just means more to me. There's so much going on. There's so many layers of between lyrics, having to look up things beyond just the lyrics, the references to different books, to different theories, different philosophies. And it's kind of nice and refreshing to not just be given all the answers right away, that there is more. There's more if you're willing to take the dive. I don't really have anything else to say. I feel like that is the perfect setup for this conversation with Andrew and I. We're going to take the dive into this conversation between Andrew and I, and I'll talk to you on the other side of it. Sometimes when I just start talking, I forget to hit record, and then I'm like, fuck, I totally missed. So it's like, a lot of times now it's like, it's easier just to hit record as soon as you start, and then wherever you actually start going, like, then you're good. But it's one of those things where it just sucks, like Dropbox, because like there's definitely like some of your like more interludes, sort of like and I'm probably pronouncing it incorrectly, Occam's Razor. Like, or even Alchemist Ascend into Elephant Bones. Like, I don't get that nice smooth transition. And it's like, it's just boop, boop. And then you're like, oh, like,
you're like, yeah, so that's going to sound great on the record. Yeah.
Yeah. On the record and on vinyl or whatever, it'll be great. But it's sort of like a cock tease for me, because I'm like, oh, where is it? Oh, I'm gonna all over. So
definitely.
But much appreciated for sending it over, so I can at least talk a little bit about the thing now.
Absolutely.
So we don't have to do this again down the road, where it's like, all right, you guys didn't talk about the record, and I'll be like, that's okay. So all that being said, I have the pleasure of once again, I'm going to switch us too, because I don't like me being on the left-hand side, because when I look at it looks like I'm looking at the camera. But I have the pleasure of talking to Andrew Wells of Eidola this time. It's a little inside joke, I guess, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense now that I actually say it out loud. But you guys got a new record getting ready to come out in July? So 2 months, called The Architect. It'll be out 3 days before my birthday, September 17th, via Rise Records now. So the last time you and I had kind of talked about this project of Eidola, I think you had said the record was done a while ago. But was basically what we now know to be the whole Blue Swan getting absorbed into Rise Records and all that stuff. Is that kind of what was slowing things up for getting this album released?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that it's always kind of tough because, like you've known me for a while. I'm not really a social media guy. I got off social media about 3 years ago now, and I was the primary, the primary for the Eidola social media. And so when I stopped using social media, we just didn't really use it. And I'm also a firm believer, like, if I don't have something to give my audience, it feels contrite, feels really contrived and kind of fake to just be pumping out the same thing, right? You get a lot of bands they're very content based. I'm not really content based. I'm more art based. Like I'm trying to get you to think about something, or I'm trying to give you a piece of art to listen to, or to visualize, to see. If I don't have something new to give you, I'm just not going to give you anything, right? I don't want to go with a tour pick from 2017, be like, oh, remember how cool that was? Or you remember this video we put out 5 years ago? Fuck that. I'm not really into that. I'm going to give you something new. And so a lot of people don't really know what happens on the back end of the music industry in terms of like the legal process of contracts and how long that process takes. I mean, I was somewhat aware, and even I was just blown away by how insane that process was, because, with how COVID went, you had a lot of smaller labels get absorbed by independent labels. And then you have a lot of independent labels that got absorbed by major labels. And so Rise got absorbed by Sony BMG, and Blue Swan got absorbed by Rise, right? So it's this hierarchy that kind of just like,
I believe the term is upstream, correct?
Yeah, exactly. So they all got upstreamed. That process itself, Blue Swan and Rise were in litigation for believe it was like 6 or 7, maybe even 8 months, where contracts went back and forth between Sony, BMG, Rise, and Blue Swan to try to get this merger to where everybody was happy with the deal. And so our album had been done at that point for a decent chunk of time. I mean, it had probably been done as long as most records are done, right? Like like we just finished the new Dance Gavin Dance record. That one's probably not going to come out until the spring of next year. Don't quote me on a release there, but it's most likely not going to come out until early next year. Most people know that it's done. Tillian, had just talked about finishing vocals. Record's great, by the way. Super excited for that one. But we got that done. It's going to take probably 6 to 8 months to get everything prepared for it. You get all the music videos and all that. So Eidola spent that normal time frame getting all that done. And once it was done, we're like, okay, well, COVID sucks, but we're fine to drop it. Like, we don't need to wait for a tour. This could take a long time for everything to get back to normal, for people to feel comfortable going to shows again, for all the legal stuff to get worked out. And we were fine to drop it. We're like, let's just drop the whole thing. And Will called me and was like, hey, we're in the process of doing this with Rise, and we really think that Rise is going to give this record and this band a little bit better of a platform, more distribution. It'll reach more people this way. And I said, okay, well, that's fine. I'm fine to wait. So we waited, 6, 7, 8 months. Finally, when we got done with that process, Rise took about a month or two just to get some other stuff done with some of their other artists. They had Spirit Box that they were finishing up with, and Angels and Airwaves, AFI. They had some great, bands have been in the industry way longer than us. Definitely take a higher priority list. And at the end of the day, we're like, okay, we'll be patient for that. Well, after that, they approached us and said, okay, now it's time to do artist contracts. And so now artist contracts are a whole nother thing when it comes to litigation. So we had to go back and forth in litigation for our artist contracts to get a fair shot at that. That was about another 6 or 7 months. So all in all, you're talking about a delay of about 18 months or so from when we would have normally put a record out. So yeah, really frustrating for us. But at the end of the day, it's finally coming out. We're really excited. We're getting to put it out on a tour with Dance Gavin Dance. I get to play with both bands. I'm really excited for that. And I think that it was, well worth the wait. So
I wondered how this was going to go because of the last time we talked, which no one has heard.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask a question and it's sort of based on that, but it correlates to this record.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm trying to make sure I don't say or bring up things that aren't supposed to be said. Okay. So when we had talked on that Dance Gavin Periphery tour, probably 3 years ago now or so.
Yeah, I think it was 3, about 3.
So you had made a comment about this record because I don't remember if it was on record or just when we were talking that day, but you had talked about this record and how it was a lot more angrier and, straight out the gate when you just sent me the record, the first 3 songs just evoke a very, very angry kind of place where you're figuring out yourself in the world, in life. And I know from one of the first time we actually talked, you talked about growing up in Utah and your childhood and all that kind of stuff. Songs like Hidden Worship, Counterfeit Shrines, Caustic Prayer, they just really evoke this visceral theme of struggling with, I don't want to say identity necessarily, but maybe the concept of yourself. And maybe I'm kind of even getting a little bit of that because of what, and I might be pronouncing the title wrong, Occam's Razor or Occam's Razor.
Yep.
And for those that don't know, that basically is a sort of philosophical rule, I want to say, that basically is that we should not increase beyond a reason the number of entities required to explain anything. that basically all things should be equal in its simplest solution or something to that effect, if I understand that correctly.
Yeah, you're pretty close. So yeah, Occam's razor as a philosophical concept just basically means the more or less the simplest solution is often the correct one, right?
Okay.
If you can find whatever the most likely or the most simple solution is to a problem, that's generally more often than not the genuine objective solution, right? And that song in particular is that song and then Perennial Philosophy are both really personal songs for me. And you to touch on what you said previously, the album definitely comes from a lot of angles. There's still a heavy conceptual reference. I'm actually going to be doing a breakdown podcast with a friend of mine named Kevin from New York. We're going to do kind of a track by track to go over the narrative concept for this record, how it ties into previous Eidola concepts. But this, I would say, is definitely the most personal record for me in terms of kind of a symbiotic relationship between those two mediums, right? An actual narrative and then some very personal content for me. And there's a lot of anger in there for sure. And I think that struggling with certain aspects of my identity has been something that's been explored particularly over the last 3 years or so. And I know that we had talked quite a bit, just a few years ago, and a lot's happened even since then, through therapy, through a lot of other life changes that I've made to just really, really figure myself out and dial myself in. And this record definitely reflects that process. It definitely dials that in pretty heavily.
Well, I mean, that was, and again, without going into, and it sucks for the listener technically, without going into super specifics, eventually that episode will see the light of day. I'm very proud of it, the conversation we just had and all that. So eventually it will see the light of day. But the thing about, something you had mentioned in, that time frame of your life, or, as a lot of Christians and people in religion say, that season you were in, I had wondered, because and the timeline might be a little staggered for me, but like I kind of had thought this record was done then, but now I'm kind of getting the feeling that you maybe have gone and changed some of the things to reflect more of where you are ish on the other side of that process that you were going through of kind of reevaluating life things. Is that accurate? Like, or is this all even before our conversation like 3 years ago?
That's pretty close. I would say that's fairly accurate. The record wasn't recorded when we had talked on that tour,
okay. So but
it had been, it was written. It was more or less written. Not all the vocals had been written though, okay. And so there's kind of a, and that's why I'm so glad you reached out. I'm so glad we get to have another conversation, because it's very personal. It's very conversational, which I like. So. Without going too, TMI, I guess you could say, the vocals were split up between two periods of time that were, I would say, probably one of the toughest seasons of my entire life. Right? It was the music had been written, and I had been recording the music with Sergio and Matt Hansen. So I had written all the songs. I'd written all the guitar, I'd written all the bass, I demoed out some drums for Matt, and I'd started on the vocals. I started with the lyrics, I'd gotten the concept dialed in, and we flew out to Portland and started recording instruments. And to give you an exact timeline, we had started recording instruments, and we had recorded drums, and I'd done quite a bit of bass for about 2.5 weeks. And then Gavin Dance came in for 10 days, right in the middle of that recording process. And we did Headhunter and Bloodwolf, right? We did those two singles back to back while we were in the studio with Chris. So they just came in, my drummer flew home, my bassist flew home. And I stayed, obviously, and worked on Headhunter and collaborated on Bloodwolf. And then once Dance was done, my screamer, Matt, and then Sergio flew out, and then we took another 2 weeks or so and did the rest of the instruments for the record. And we had done a little bit of vocals. I think we had tracked Caustic Prayer and I think we tracked probably Hidden Worship and maybe one other song. And we didn't have time to finish the vocals because of how that all worked out, right? If we would have had those extra couple weeks that dance came in, but obviously dance is the priority here. So we got that done. Chris said, okay, we're going to have to come back and do the rest of the vocals. And I said, okay, when's the next time you have available? And he's like, not till after you get off your next tour, right? So we ended up, so that was when we had our conversation. It was like that tour, and that was it was a pretty tricky time because we had done, I think we did Swan Fest in April, and we done Swan Fest in April, and I had 2 suicide attempts that year. There was like one that was right after Swan Fest, and then one in the fall, and that process was when I had split up doing the rest of the vocals. And so I was going through that while I was writing and recording the vocals for The Architect. And so a lot of the record reflects on my mental health at the time. I think it's a pretty good snapshot of what I'm grasping at there. So it was a very difficult period. I'm doing much better now, but that was definitely a huge factor in the lyrics and in the delivery of that record. So
I think for me, knowing what, and you just kind of brought up one of the bigger talking points, really, that was kind of a shift in our conversation from previously. Now you're kind of talking about it in conjunction to the recording of this record. And I do feel like by the time you kind of get to Occam's Razor, it kind of, there's a little bit of a shift. Like I said, I feel like the beginning of the record starts off very aggressive and very angry. And I feel like by the time you kind of get there, that it's almost like a shift. And I almost feel like, and I was going to bring this up, but like I said, I didn't know how to bring it up without referencing the reason I'm bringing it up, which now since you did, I can ask this officially, but it's like, it feels like you kind of separated the record based on, this is the anger I went through and trying to find myself and trying to figure out what, quote unquote, what's wrong with me and how I need to be better. And then there's kind of this working through kind of musically and lyrically from what I was able to pick up on the one listen. And that's why I said I kind of went back a couple of times. Because even some of the lyrics, like, and I think it was Empty Gardens, actually, like there was kind of like the screaming part at the end, and I don't remember the lyric initially off the top of my head, but I remember going like, that feels like almost kind of a resolution kind of to some of the stuff, the beginning process of, and almost, in myself going to therapy over the last, 8 months or so. It's kind of funny, and I haven't told you this because I wanted to wait until we were going to talk, but it's like going back through your music, even, back to Degenitera, like I feel like I identify more with the things you're saying because having gone through therapy, you kind of notice some of the trends or kind of the things you have to do where it's like, why is this happening? You're asking the whys and looking for the answers to make yourself a better person. And it's funny that I feel like your band, whether you were going through therapy even back then, I go, it feels like this is what therapy kind of feels like at times, where it's like you're fucking mad and you're angry, but it's misplaced to a degree, but you don't realize that in the time. And it isn't until you get more tools to unlock these answers and how to work your way through problems, do you end up then being able to kind of have resolution, and you can kind of look back with more calmness, which, a song like Alchemist Ascended into Elephant Bones kind of feels like a manifestation of that musically to me.
Yeah, I think that's a keen observation. I think anyone who's gone through intensive therapy would probably agree with you if they dive into some of that lyrical content. I've been in therapy every week for it's been about 2 years since that last attempt, and it's helped tremendously. But there's a processing period, and it ebbs and flows. There's certain things that get brought up from your past, certain things from your childhood, certain things from your present, potentialities from your future. And I think that processing that can bring up a lot, right? It brings up a lot of anger, regret, sadness, remorse, guilt. I mean, there's a lot of things that you have to go through and process. And the latter half of the record is absolutely, how that's being processed and all the avenues in which we do that. So Alchemist Descendant is a particularly strong piece, especially because the talking part on that song is Matt Hansen. That's actually our drummer. So we've had some level of an instrumental piece on every record, and most of them have some type of talking part, some spoken word piece, right? So I did the Omega piece on Degeneratera. Brandon and Matt Domer split a piece on the purpose we find in our voices on Degeneratera as well. And then James did a spoken word on Sri Vishnu Yantra and on To Speak to Listen. Loved how that one turned out. And then so Matt approached me and while we were doing this, and this song we had already written and recorded most of the record at this point, and it was 11 songs. And he was like, "Hey, is there any way you could write kind of an interlude track? I would really love a spoken word part on this record, because his mom had just passed away, and he was working through that, processing that, and we had a lot of death. I mean, just so much death in the last 2 years. It's just been crazy. I mean, even COVID aside, like it's been pretty intense. I think I've been to more funerals in the last year than I've been my entire life. It's been over a dozen, and it's really, it just hits you. It really puts things in perspective in terms of like, why am I here? What am I trying to accomplish? What am I doing? What are the things I waste my time on? What are the vices that control my behavior? And what the fuck am I going to do to fix that? Because I can't keep taking those things for granted, when there's plenty of people here that don't even get to be here anymore to even have that choice. So Matt approached me and said, "Hey, can I write this piece about my mom?" And I said, "Absolutely." And so I messaged Chris. I called him up and I said, "Hey, if I write and record an interlude and I just do all the piano work." I mean, I did all the piano and the production work for the whole record, but I was like, can I just do one song? I don't have to fly back and record it. I can do it myself. And then are you okay to mix it? And let me know if anything sounds janky. And he was like, "Yeah, absolutely." So I wrote it, sent it off to Hansen. He did a couple drafts of this spoken word piece, turned out beautiful. Really gets me teared up every time I listen to it. So he did a great job with that. I'm really, really proud of him for stepping in and getting that done. And then Chris just took it all, mixed it, and it turned out to be like a really great, really cool sounding interlude. Also fits with the theme in terms of the conceptual placement geographically. So it's very Middle Eastern. It's got some, some various auxiliary percussion in there, some sitar and some other things that turned out really cool. So it's
funny. It reminded me a little bit of like something Imogen Heap would do personally.
Yeah. I was actually listening to
vocals, I was like, this
feels
like something Imogen Heap would do, like musically, and just kind of the way I don't think it's a vocoder, but like there's an effect on the voice that kind of sounds like something she would do, in conjunction to what her music. But again, a weird reference that like a lot of people I know don't really know who that is.
Oh, I love her, dude. She's awesome. I was listening to her a ton during that record. She's super talented. Love her. She's awesome.
Yeah, I need to when and if she ever tours the States, I need to go see her because she's just phenomenal. And that whole thing with the gloves where she's able to manipulate her voice, like, Jesus Christ, that thing is insane. Like, I don't even know how it works. Like, she explains it, and I'm still like, yeah, whatever. You wiggle your fingers, and then it does
do the glove thing. Yeah, she's dope, man. I would love the chance to see her live. I've never seen her live, so.
Kind of shifting things a little bit, because like now we've kind of talked about a record that probably by the time this comes out, people still won't have heard the whole thing, so
sure.
I don't want to bog it down with just like a bunch of album talk. So now that we've kind of done the job of whatever, I've always said like I like just talking to you because like you and I get along really well. We're able to just kind of talk about things. So something that you had actually just kind of said that I thought to be an interesting talking point, and it sucks because it's it's interesting how in depth, we learn a lot about ourselves. I had, like I said, I'd started to go to therapy, and then had lost my uncle a couple of months. Probably about like 5-6 months ago or so. And, I had a weird epiphany where, going back home, it's the first time I've gone home probably like since I've been with my wife, since I started dating my wife, so almost 10 years ago, at least. And I hadn't been home before that for many, many years. And the only reason I go back home now is for funerals. Like, it's the only reason, because it's like, that's where my mom's side of the family is. Mm-hmm. And seeing my uncle be buried, and it's like, there's like, in front of me, there was my parents and my grandparents, both who were divorced. So they're kind of sitting on separate sides of the aisleway or whatever. But I'm looking forward, and I go, once those two, as far as my grandparents go, I don't think I'm ever coming back to Delaware. There's nothing that ties me here anymore. And mm-hmm. what little bit of connection I feel like as my home is gone. And that was kind of a weird thought to think of. And then it's like, the other thought I had was, I'm literally sitting behind, in theory, as long as nothing bad happens to me, that those are presumably the next 4 funerals I'll go to in my family. That it's like because both my dad's parents are gone. So now it will be my mom's parents, and then presumably my parents. And then it's like, okay. And then I just had this thought of, since I now live, like, I don't have any attachments to where I grew up. I don't live where I grew up as a young kid. So I don't really feel any connections to anywhere. And I felt like there was this kind of weird freedom of like, well, I could go anywhere, and anywhere's home, because I don't have any attachments to any one place. Like, I've lived here in Grand Rapids longer than I've lived anywhere, but this isn't home either. It's just where I reside. And it was kind of a weird concept to think of while I'm at a funeral, and just thinking about how finite life is, and just what people and places mean, and the importance we place on those things, even when they really don't.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are all very fair points. It's an introspection, into life. And for me, as an artist writing songs, that's something I've always explored in each of the Eidola albums. In particular, is a lot of existential questions. I never set out with the intention of telling people how to think. Right? I would just like to ask people to think. I think that's always a good start, right? It's like, how do I introduce a question that will get you to think about something, right? To think about a topic, to think about a question or an answer. And then as you're thinking about it, maybe questioning whether or not the answer itself, or it to be true, objectively or subjectively true. And I don't know, for me, it's always been a cathartic process of doing that for myself. It's like, do I know the answer? Am I correct in this assumption, right? Whether that be with religion or with some type of parasocial observation. Is my observation correct, or does that have room for improvement? And in thinking about that, I'm always learning something new. And I think seeking out knowledge through history, through psychology, theology, that's always been an interest of mine. And so as an artist, I like to try to capture that in a way that not only documents my own experience with that, but hopefully gives the listener an opportunity to sort through their own emotions, their own feelings, and their own existentialism or nihilism. I mean, some of that's explored at length on this record too. So I think it gives people an opportunity to just process and to think. And I don't know, it's art that I like. It's art that resonates with me. And if it resonates with other people, that's a bonus. So,
in wanting to challenge the people who will take the time to dig through, to find like more meaning behind your lyrics, song titles, and as you've said, across every conversation we've had, where there's bigger themes and bigger concepts at play. It's just a matter of how far you're willing to dig to find them. Do you get frustrated when people only look at things at a surface level, knowing that you purposely have? No, you're already shaking your head. No.
No. Yeah, I don't, just because. And so to our arts, there are objective measurements to art. I used to, as a kid, like in my early 20s or late teens, I was kind of a hippie, it's just kind of art is completely subjective. Whatever makes art good is up to the listener. I'm less on that page now in my adulthood, just having turned 30. I think that there's a mix, right? People can find value in something artistically, regardless of what it is. And that has its measurements there. But historically, I think that there are things that make art objectively good, right? Or objectively bad, from a holistic sense, right? Okay. Like what makes art stand the test of time? Why is a Queen album a #1 album on iTunes for fucking 25 years, right? Or 20 years, right? Why is it today a top album on iTunes when you have so many like unique and good and individuals and bands making art now that can't even crack the top 200? What makes that art objectively so good that it spans the test of time? It's tested for its merit repeatedly, and it succeeds. I think that there are certain things that you can dive into, and in music theory is a lens to look at it through. You can say, okay, there's objective things within theory that make this composition good, right? You'd see people like Bach and Handel and Tchaikovsky exploring certain themes, and you would say, okay, this is what it is. But at the end of the day, how I deliver something, the message that I speak to, right, that can be different through someone else's perception. And it's not my job to tell them how to think or what to think about the art. So if they only hear it and they go, man, that's a kick-ass drum beat, I really like that song, it's like, cool, great. You still got something cool out of it. It still helped you with something, or it was just a fun release for you in your stressful life, from your day to day. Or like, oh man, that singer is really good. I like his voice. I don't really give a shit what he's talking about. I just want to hear him sing. It's like, cool. I still am flattered by that. That's awesome. If you just like my voice and you don't want to dive in, but there's multiple layers there, right? If you have God, this is a dumb ass metaphor, but like a 7-layer cheesecake and someone only wants to eat the top because it's chocolate, it's like, sure, man, eat the top. Like, I don't give a shit.
It's funny that's your go-to, because I was immediately drawn to a line from the was it Downtown, that Macklemore song?
Yeah.
Where he's like, there's layers to this shit. Tiramisu.
Man, I'm always thinking about dessert, dude. I'm on a dirty bulk right now. I'm always thinking about some freaking high calorie desserts. So no, it's layered, right? Like I would love to give people that want to go deeper the opportunity to do so. And I really did try my best to weigh the balance of making that more accessible on the Architect, right? There are times in the past where, I don't read comments anymore, but when To Speak to Listen came out, I was still on social media. Obviously you read the comments when you're on there. So there were a couple times where we'd get, some really good reviews for songs like Amplissimus Machina. And then there would be somebody come in and be like, these guys are full of shit. Like this guy just picked up a thesaurus and went to town. He's trying to sound real smart and blah, 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 blah. It's like, okay, well, that's cool. That again, that's your perception. That doesn't impact me at all. That definitely wasn't my intention. But I did make a conscious effort on the Architect to kind of streamline it, because I've heard this a couple times, but it's, if you could have the best message in the world, you could have a message that would bring world peace across the board, right? But if you can't communicate it properly, a lot of people are just not going to understand it, and it's not going to hit home. It's not going to accomplish what you want it to accomplish, right? So I made a conscious effort on the Architect to streamline it, make it simple, right? So you'll notice all the titles are 2-word titles. They're all relatively simple, right? There's, adjective, noun, or verb, noun. There's nothing that's like super hard to pronounce, like Occam's razor or Occam's razor. Like you can pronounce that a couple of different ways. But you're right on the money. And if a simple Google search, you can find the philosophical concept. Perennial philosophy, same way. Some people might pronounce it slightly different, but it's nothing like degeneratera or like these big long titles that, some people find really cool and endearing, and some people are just like, I don't know what the fuck this is. I'm not going to take the time to even look at it. And that's fine, right? I just wanted to make an effort without trying to, go mainstream. I still don't think it's even close to mainstream. It's just a little bit more digestible. It's a little bit easier to open the door to go further into those layers if you choose to. I tried to just kind of streamline that process a little bit, make it a little bit more accessible to the listener.
Well, I almost feel like, and I don't know if this is like my therapy kind of coming through as an extra tool, but sometimes I feel like when you're younger, there's the perception that we're not smart as young people. So you try to do things that are going to present you in a way that you want to be more treated like an adult and so forth. Or, the old, like when you're like, oh, you wouldn't get it. And it's like, but maybe you're not helping me understand where you're trying to come from and trying to get these concepts or whatever that you're trying to articulate. Whereas I feel like, this is your third record and you're talking as someone who, which this doesn't sound old to me because I'm more approaching 40 now than I'm like past 30. But when you're like, oh, I turned 30 and I looking back at even just when you're going, oh, when I was so young in my 20s, which really isn't that far removed from where you are right now.
No,
like
yeah.
For me, it's like, okay, that was almost 2 decades ago for me. But that just, I think, speaks to the growth. And I think when you said that to me, I immediately go, this is someone who, as a creative and as a someone who wants to kind of maybe have people understand what you're saying, you're not dumbing down your message, but you're making it more accessible. So that way when people, because I mean, honestly, I remember when I got the email for Degenitera and I was like, what the fuck? How do you even pronounce this? And I'm looking at the song titles and I'm like, Second Temple, like Third Temple, like, oh my God, do I have to really listen to this whole thing, study all the lyrics? And like, it just seemed like homework. And that was just to book you to come play here. And then, that was my reaction to that. And so it's like, I can totally see how maybe 2 records, which, I love because it reminds me, and kind of speaking to your Queen reference, why does that record resonate more with other people? I think it's because people have more time with that record to kind of understand some of the intricacies and stuff like that. I mean, a song like Bohemian Rhapsody, like we lauded as musicians and as fans, but it's so intricate. Like I think it still has the most tracks for one fucking song, like ever, like all the layers and all the stuff that's on it. And there's still little nuances that you can catch and learn or find listening to it now, all these years later. And I think that's the thing that's interesting about music is, yes, Bohemian Rhapsody, it's a great pop song. It's kind of long. It's interesting. It takes you somewhere, and that can be all you get out of it. But if you start going a little bit deeper and kind of just noticing like, oh, it's cool how like these little pieces are like, here's a little whatever, and it just keeps bringing you back. But it's in a pretty accessible way to just keep, like you said, building layers and kind of tearing them down and finding more within it. And I think maybe with this record for me, when I heard it, the one time I've gone through it, I go, this just feels like a more grown up way for Eidola to move forward. It's not dumbed down in any way, but like Gone are the 6, 7, 8 minute long songs. And you kind of got right to the core of what it is. And I think that's something I struggle with sometimes is getting to the point. Yeah. Did the 9 minutes I say explaining something, is it all valid? Absolutely. Could I have said it in 4? Probably.
Maybe.
And I think that's kind of where you guys are at. For me, as a fan from not like, the last handful of years, it feels like that's the progression you guys have kind of made to me on this record.
Definitely. That was the intention. So I'm glad that you got that from it. I think that it was really a lesson in, just definitely a lesson in patience the entire time, obviously, but it was a lesson in refinement, right? It's you're foraging diamonds out of coal. You're trying to refine your process. You're trying to refine what you do. And I think we really made an honest and genuine attempt at that with this record. We try to just, again, try to trim the fat out without dumbing it down. Like we still wanted those deep intrinsic messages. We still wanted that exploration. We still wanted people to dive into history, philosophy, theology. Like these are all snapshots documenting, my process at viewing those things, which is obviously an undertaking in and of itself. Like I've spent years going and researching through countless theological texts. I mean, the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, the Quran, the Bible, the Talmud. I mean, I've read each of those things and historical content behind them pretty relentlessly for years, but it's very hard to surmise that content in 60 minutes, right? You wouldn't see somebody try to take the history of the world and try to tell you it in 60 minutes without, leaving something out. And so I wanted to make it as streamlined as possible so that people could have an open door that they could explore it if they choose to, but also still keep it surface level enough that if it's just a good song to you, awesome, great, bump it. If it makes you jam out in your car, you like, belting the words out, you want to go see a live show because you just love how hard this breakdown hits or whatever, great, that's cool. I like that. I would get along with you just fine across the board. I appreciate that you would even take the time to listen. So I think that the Architects really just was a lesson in refining all the things that we thought made Eidola cool in the first place. And just growing through some of the things that were roadblocks in the first place or stumbling blocks for us. We look back at that music now and I love all the songs that Eidola's written. I think we've really done something special with this band where you can go back to our previous discography and find some hidden gems in there. But there's always methods to improve, right? There's always ways that you can take your art to another level. And most people understand that. They're like, okay, the art that you make when you're 17 and the art you make when you're 30 are going to be very different depending on the life path that you choose. And sometimes it goes one way, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes your star burns really bright when you're young, and sometimes you're a late bloomer and you got to figure your shit out. So I think it's kind of a cool combo of that. So I liked what we've done over the last 9 or 10 years. And, we were probably going to call it quits after this record, and we'll see what happens. I don't know. I have no idea, dude. The whole world got upheaved in a very short span of time in the last year. So we'll see what happens with touring and what happens with the recording industry. Everybody kind of has careers now, outside of Sergio. Sergio's definitely gung ho. He's ready to take on 4 more bands, whatever it takes. He's insanely talented, very driven. Love that guy to death. He's one of my best friends. He's an incredible human being. He's really impressed me a lot over the last couple of years, especially just with his own growth. And so I know that he's gung ho about doing music for the rest of his life. The rest of us are we're a little skeptical. So we'll see what happens. We'll always do music in some capacity. It's just whether or not we're going to pursue it as a full-time career, you could say. That already has become increasingly difficult and frustrating over the last decade or so. And I don't know. Like rock has its ups and downs, and it has for a long time. But subgenre niches of rock tend to ebb and flow as well within that microcosm. We'll see what happens. I don't know if everybody else is settling down, starting families, and going into their careers. We'll still do stuff together, but it'll probably be a lot more sparingly. And when we don't have content, we're not a social media band. That's the thing. We're not a band that's going to be like posting every day or, doing the stories or checking the comments. It's just not something that we do. I think social media is fucking evil. So I don't participate, but whatever, we might build a website at some point that's a little more functional that people can see, kind of go more glass jaw or death grip style in terms of how they
just
market their
merch only.
Yeah. Well, there's that.
Just become a brand.
Just a brand. Yeah, just jackets. No, we'll still do. I mean, the music is definitely still the core component. So, we'll see what happens with that. We love playing music together, so we'd like to continue that. And if people choose to listen, that's awesome.
Knowing that we were going to do this chat, I don't know if this is why this quote popped out at me. So I was watching the show Atypical, which is on Netflix. I don't know if you've heard of it or seen it or anything.
I haven't.
Okay. So basically it's a show that's got like Michael Rappaport and the chick from like Fast Times at Ridgemont High as parents, and one of the kids is actually like autistic or whatever in the show. But he's not in real life. And ironically, the kid in real life like has a band called Whelm, and they're like a grindcore band basically. And he's the vocalist of that band. So it's just kind of really weird that it's like, oh, you appear to be this as an actor, and then like when I find out you're in a band and it's a pretty fucking brutal, aggressive band, you're just like, oh. But I was watching it, and so like the last season just dropped, and the kid, his character is in college, and he didn't do an assignment or something like that, and Sarah Gilbert plays his teacher or professor, whatever they are in college, I don't know. And to do a makeup project, she had him interview people and whatever. And in the line of questions that he's asking people, the character goes, "What are you a master at?" And it made me think about how often we tell ourselves, we can't be masterful at something. And, the phrase that a jack of all trades, master of none, always like came popping up into my head initially. And it made me kind of wonder, is this perhaps our perception of not being able to master something because essentially we have learned through things like therapy and just being able to be more connected to other people, that putting that kind of burden or pressure isn't stable, like mentally healthy for us at times to have that level of this is where I need to be? Or is it perhaps that, like you're saying with social media and so forth, and as I've seen just getting older, that maybe if we kind of take that off the table, it's because we're lazy and we don't want to push ourselves to be masterful at something anymore?
I think it's I mean, my personal opinion would be that it's somewhat of a balance of those things, and with all things, right? I think working with so many artists, right? Working with Gavin in particular, they're perfectionists at their own craft, right? They strive to be masters of the craft, and that's why I've been with them for 6 years, because I'm in the same boat. I try to master my craft. I try to be the best at what I do. I think where it becomes unhealthy is if your obsession with externalities overtakes your obsession with the actual mastery of the craft. Right? When you become more obsessed with the parasocial relationships, you become more obsessed with how you're perceived, what people think, what the commentary is going to be, versus am I good at what I do and can I be better? If so, how do I become better? Right? And that can be at anything. That can be at your own mental health. That can be at your own physical health. It can be at your artistic composition, your voice, your guitar playing. Right? Am I focused on the right things? Right. That's my perception of it. Am I focused on being the master am I focused on being the master of reality and controlling everybody else's thoughts, or am I focused on being the master at what I want to be good at? Right. Whether that's, physical art, or could be anything, could be cooking, could be raising kids, could be literally anything that you have that's a dream of yours or a goal that you have. I think if you're focused on the right things and your heart's in the right place, you're going to have a healthier relationship with it, right? That's definitely my perception of that, for sure.
It was just one of those that, like, when it came up, I was like, I jotted it down literally on my phone, because I was like, that's an interesting
take, for sure.
Yeah, like, and it was just like kind of like a throwaway line in a show, but I was like, huh. And it was just one of those that, like, sometimes I feel like I'll latch on to something like that, or it just will be an interesting concept, and then I'll just sit in my head about it for a while. And it's one of those where, in doing this, like, I asked it with a friend of mine that I talked to yesterday, and it was one of those, like, I feel like it's an open-ended enough question on either side that will be interesting to explore. And I feel like that's the thing as I get older, where I just like exploring ideas, and, like, not even with a perceived, like, okay, got you, you're wrong, here's why you're wrong. Like, it's not to bring up a question just to prove that I'm smarter or anything like that. It's just like, I thought this is interesting. What does anyone else think? What kind of concepts or ideas can I pull from somebody else and maybe take something I thought, and, like, this was the nucleus I had, but now I've expanded it. Now we're just kind of a sharing of ideas. And I feel like, for as much as, this stupid fucking thing like connects us and all that kind of stuff. I feel like it just divides us so much more. Like, I was talking to a friend earlier today. There's a festival here in town in a couple of days. Like, you know, first festival, first show I've been to since all of this shit went away. And it's kind of funny because like Facebook changed everything. And so now there's no like contacts like for your, you know, PR people or whatever. And so it's really made it kind of hard at times to figure out who I need to contact for something when that information isn't readily available anymore like it used to be. So I was like, hey, I know this person knows someone in this band. She can text that person and then just get me the info I need. And she did, but it was like one of those where I was like, I fucking hate Facebook. And honestly, if I ever got to the point of having a social media person that can handle all my stuff, I would probably get rid of most of it. Cause it's like, why? What's the point? I'd rather do this. That's honestly what pushed me to do this. Cause I got tired of losing our ability to communicate.
Well, yeah, it dehumanizes people entirely. It's not a net benefit to society or the human experience at all, in my opinion. And that's primarily because social media is created to manipulate you. It's absolutely created. I mean, you know, this isn't calling out people that use it. If you find benefit in it, go for it. But you should at least be aware at the people that create these systems that you interact with, and they're like the algorithms are focused on keeping you addicted, right? I've had this conversation countless times, and people that I trained, some of my clients or people I've worked with in the past, they talk to me and they're like, how did you do it? Like what got you off? How did you stay off? And what tends to happen is we have this kind of this progressive dialogue about why it's not healthy. And they go, oh, okay, that makes sense. It clicks. They go, okay, I'm going to delete it. I'm going to delete the app. Right. And they'll delete it. And then they'll realize that the first thing that they do is they wake up the next morning, they go to their phone, they start clicking, and they're like, oh, I don't have anything to scroll. What the fuck? Right. They're like, if you try it, I guarantee the same thing will happen. If you're on your phone every day doing this repetitive behavior, those systems are designed to keep you addicted. And what better way to keep you addicted than triggering your anxiety response, right? Why do you think that most content is geared towards hatred, division, clickbait material? It's because that adrenal gland response in the human brain, it overpowers everything, right? Your fight or flight response. It used to be to protect you. It used to be an environment before technology. We could talk pretty much up until the last few hundred years, right? Where your anxiety response was triggered if you were in a dangerous situation, right? And you needed to get out of there, right? Now what we're doing is flooding the human brain, especially with young kids, right? Their frontal lobe's not completely developed. You're flooding their brain with an anxiety response. We don't even know what the effects of that are going to be long-term. We're starting to see them now, right? You're starting to see them now. But if you watch things like, The Social Dilemma does a decent job at going through some of this stuff. It talks about how some of the engineers of social media they've designed things like slot machines, right? What's a slot machine designed to do? Take your fucking money, right? It's designed to keep you there as long as you're able to be there until you're broke, right? They want to take your money. Same thing with social media. You want to talk about billionaires? You want to talk about social manipulation? That's exactly what they're there for. They're there to take your fucking money through ad revenue by generating your clicks. What generates clicks? Anxiety response, right? Most people aren't just clicking on. You get it occasionally. You get somebody clicking on a cute puppy video. You've got these like heartfelt, great stories, but you'll notice it used to be more like that in like 2015, right? 2014. It'd be like, oh, check out this awesome heartfelt video. This church outreach program did this awesome thing for the community, or like this group got together for social justice, and they all came together and did this amazing thing. Now it's like, okay, well, what's going on here? Who's rioting here? What can we have you click on today? What group can we get you to hate today? Right? That's not good for society, right? And I don't think that people are fully aware of that, just because it's become such a social norm to be on social media, to be that connected with people all the time. So yeah, I just a few years ago was seeing that trend, and I was like, I don't want my worldview poisoned by what a bunch of billionaires want me to see and how they can manipulate what's in my feed. You could make the argument like you have control over what you see. Oh, I'm only going to follow puppy accounts. It's like they'll still find a way. They'll targeted advertisements. It's just not. It's not healthy. It wasn't healthy for me, for sure. And so at least I can only really speak to my own experience and what I view as a sociological impact. I think, just again, to save myself from rambling, last point, I think that eventually my hope would be that it gets regulated to some degree, just like the tobacco industry, right? You had the tobacco industry back in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, where if you study the history, you could smoke pretty much anywhere, right? You could smoke indoors, you could smoke around your kids, you could smoke on planes, right? There were doctors that were paid off by lobbyists to tell you that it was perfectly healthy to smoke, right? There were doctors that would get paid off. So you'd have these journals of medicine and these doctors, they'd come out and be like, oh yeah, smoking's perfectly healthy. You smoke in front of your kids, you smoke on the plane, do whatever the fuck you want, right? And it wasn't until all these people started dying and having these vastly terrible impacts on their health and their community health, right? It wasn't until that started to happen when legislation had to get involved and they say, okay, no, you can't smoke in the airport, outside a designated space. You can't smoke in these places. You can't smoke around kids. You can't smoke in the school, right? So once it becomes like a health crisis, that's when the laws get changed. It's unfortunate that that's what it takes, because we're already seeing a lot of the impacts that social media is having, but it's only really been around prominently for like 10 years, 15 years tops, right? We're talking MySpace days, and MySpace is already gone. Facebook took over. Facebook's on its way out. Twitter took over. That hopefully we'll see a downstream eventually. Not a net benefit, in my opinion. I would like to see something happen sooner than later. I would like it to not have to come to a fucking crisis to get that changed, but we'll see. We'll see what happens.
It's funny. I was watching a snippet of a friend of mine's Twitch stream where he's been playing like weird documentaries, and there's this like, I guess this one on Chuck E. Cheese and about how just they're a shitty company and like that but it started because someone was like, oh, they take their pizza, and if you leave like a half a pizza or whatever, they'll just take the slices and then reuse it. Like they'll resell essentially your food that you didn't eat to someone. And so in watching this whole thing, the part that I took away from it more than that, though, is at one point they were talking about how they should probably get rid of like a Chuck E. Cheese and places like it, because essentially what it's doing is grooming kids to be gambling addicts. And it was showing like people at like casinos, like, here's this game, it's a slot machine. Okay, how is it any different from this game at Chuck E. Cheese? And it's like they give you tokens, like you always will get, or not a token, they'll give you tickets. You always get a ticket, so you're never losing. You're always getting something. So at that point, you're not really at a quote unquote loss. But it was really weird the way that, like, when that presented itself, I was like, holy shit. Like, it was just like, I know the documentary goes on to explore way bigger things, but like, that was like the one where I was like, wow, I never noticed the parallel there of like, essentially something like that is conditioning our kids to, more, give me more money. I need to win that thing. And then it becomes this thing of like, but you're not going to win it. The system's rigged, so you always lose in those situations. Or the few times that it's going to pay out, that's to enable everybody else around you to be like, see, that person won, though, could be me.
Sure.
It was really weird to see that. I was like, wow, I guess I never realized how even something like that is, like I said, conditioning our children first and foremost, like to have these habits that I didn't even think about. And, I know like Doc Coyle and I from Bad Wolves like had talked a long time ago, about social media and more how it pertains to sports. Like,
sure,
there's always the, Michael Jordan's the greatest, so on and so forth, and Kobe's the greatest. And, we were talking about that debate, and, he was like, I think the one thing that can't be undervalued, even though we'll never talk about it being a direct result of someone's, actual, like how they play the game. LeBron's been the only one who has had to be around in the 24-hour news cycle. Kobe kind of got a little bit of it. But him and Jordan came out essentially when all it was print. And then you can control that based on who you allow to interview this person, or, and the reach of some of these op-ed pieces only will go so far. It's not like it is today where it can go viral and go everywhere. And so, it's like, how hard would it be to, you turn on your TV and they're talking about how you had a bad game, so you suck and you're overrated, Now you have different forms of social media where LeBron probably won't see me if I contact or comment or tag him in something. I'm like, man, you've really fucking sucked tonight. Probably won't see that, but he could.
Might.
But it's like, the thing is we have more access to people now to tell them these things, or good, bad, or indifferent. And it's so hard to, wonder what that's going to do to someone. And I had even made the comment, I wondered now, in a way, like you had talked about, you can kind of curate what you want to see, like on social media. And so it made me kind of go, I wonder how negatively that's going to impact our future, because it's like, I grew up, and if people wanted to bully me, say terrible things about me, they fucking could. And I just had to learn how to get over it and have thicker skin, and either learn how to communicate with these people like, hey, and work our way through it. But I don't know if the generations coming up now can do that, because it's like, if I don't like it, well, you're blocked, or I'm only going to have the world be exactly how I want it to be. And that's not realistic either.
Yeah. You made a lot of good points there. Don't get me started on journalists. We would be here for like 2 more hours.
I'm sort of one of them, I've been told.
I would not view it that way. I think there's a difference, right? You're not writing like hit pieces and schmear pieces. Yeah. Schmear. Some bagel schmears, dude. Yes, I know. I need to get my calories in. There's definitely a difference. You're not like, you're not going in with the intention of, again, it goes back to what we talked about at the very beginning of this whole interview. It's like, where's your heart at? What's your intention, right? If your intention is to gain knowledge or to provide an objective perspective, an honest perspective, I think that you're the best journalist that you could possibly be, right? And that's a net positive. If your intention is to just write exposés all the time and to try to hold everybody to some non-existent moral litmus test or some unachievable standard of ethical consumption, I think it's not really a path that's going to lead to a better future, in my opinion. I think it's just going to divide people. We stop seeing humans as humans. We start seeing them as power structures, I guess you could say, to be manipulated. You're climbing a different social hierarchy at that point. So, you made a lot of really good points there. You've got somebody that has to be on all the time, like LeBron, right? Somebody who's got to be on constantly. I think that plays a bigger role in people's mental health than they would like to lead on, because you have to be on constantly. And I think that's what leads a lot of people to drugs, and alcohol abuse, right? Mental health crises. And a lot of people avoid therapy because it's expensive, right? It is expensive. I'm not going to lie to you and tell you it's not expensive. But it's well worth the investment. If you're going to invest in something, would you rather invest your time and money into something that's making your life worse, or would you rather invest your time and money into something that's making your life better? And to your last point, curating this reality, this parasocial subjective reality, I think is fairly harmful, because objective reality exists whether or not you want to look at it that way. Whether or not you want to see it, it exists. It's there, right? Like if you go into a war zone and you get picked off, like that's objective reality, right? You're done, right? Your stream of consciousness is tapped. If you walk into a collapsing building, right? Like that's objective reality. That's real. That's out there, right? We have the luxury in a lot of modern countries now where we have, a lot of people only want to look at the last like 100 or 200 years of human history. It's like, dude, you got it.
Our human history. That's the problem. I think is that America only has 200-ish years.
Exactly. Right. But you gotta dive deeper. It's so much more intricate than that. And there's so much more to learn. And I think that we do take for granted things like things as simple as running water, being able to clean yourself with soap every day, or, to be able to, go and get any type of medicine over the counter, right? For any number of ailments that could be self-inflicted or could not be, right? It could be well beyond your scope of what you could have self-inflicted yourself with. So when you're looking at all of these amazing net positives for humanity, which is, medicine, in particular, and technology from like a healthcare or a quality of life standpoint, so many amazing things have been done where our quality of life is just better than ever, right? But because of that, people want to find more. The Overton window keeps moving, the bar keeps moving to where it's like, okay, well, what's the next standard of excellence? How do I get there, right? Rather than taking the time to be like, okay, I'm really grateful I'm alive today. I'm really grateful that I got to wake up today. I'm really grateful that I can go to my fridge and find food. And if I can't find food in there, that there are a lot of systems in place that will help me to get that, right? That's one of the things I'm really proud of for the church that I go to here in Utah. We do a lot of amazing community outreach programs. So one of the programs we do that I participate in is it's a food truck. It's like a food pantry is what we call it. So every Tuesday and Wednesday, we get a truck that comes in. We have a deal with like Costco and Walmart and some other local farms and local grocery stores. And they donate food that they would normally throw away. That's perfectly good food. I mean, it's not expired. It's just, you know how it is. When you got groceries, there's plenty of information you can find on grocery stores that throw out perfectly good food, right? So we get that food and we unload a truck every Tuesday, and we set up a food pantry for people who are less fortunate, members of the community that are down on their luck. They're, homeless, or they're on, food stamps, and it's completely free. We give them a cart, they walk through, they can grab as many groceries as they want. We walk them to their car. And we just help them out, right? There are amazing things going on here where if you're down on your luck and you need the help, there are incredible social systems in place, at least in this community, that I've really tried to make an effort to participate in, that will help you to get back on your feet and help you to stay away from hunger and poverty, right? And I don't think there's ever been a time in human history where that's been so readily available, right? Where we have so much to be grateful for waking up every day. So again, it's your intention, your focus, where your heart's at. I would like my focus and intention to be on love, compassion, and things that I'm grateful for, versus what can I complain about today, right? What can I bitch about today? How can I make someone else feel bad on the internet? Like, if you're a person that does that, go fuck yourself. Like, just go fuck yourself.
I was going to say, as soon as you said that, I feel bad. I don't remember this song title off the top of my head, but literally the opening line is, my intention is to explore the realm of possibility in the human condition, I believe is the lyric.
Yeah, my intention is to explore the realm of consciousness and the human condition. Very close.
Yeah. Yep. So think that's a good stopping point for whenever we do another one of these eventually. Looking at tour dates, I'm hoping they all come through. I mean, who knows? I think this first batch of touring and all that, I just saw Vince that runs Metal Sucks, I think, made a comment. He goes, I had the epiphany today that all it's going to take is one person from one band touring, these clubs and all that, that's going to basically shut all this shit down again. And I was like, fuck. Didn't think of it like that, but
wait, what? I don't understand. What does he mean by that?
So basically saying that, like, all these bands that are going out and touring, like, literally right now, that all it's going to take is for one of them to if they're not vaccinated, and not wearing their mask and doing all the things they're supposed to, all it's really going to take is one person on one of these tours to then potentially spread it through not only their band, their touring, like the rest of the tour, possibly anyone that's working in close proximity to them in the venues, so on and so forth.
Does the vaccine work or doesn't it? Because if the vaccine works, I just don't. I don't know. I don't understand that point. Because I think the point he's sort of making, and I didn't see any follow up from him, but I took it more as like,
because like right now I don't remember what band it was. It made kind of news that like half of like the two vocalists of this band, one was essentially kicked out because they didn't get vaccinated. And part of them being an international band coming here to the States is you have to have it, I guess, in order to travel and so forth. Or I don't know if that was a condition of like the tour or their actual international travel from where they are. But was one of those who are like, and it's fine if that's a choice he chooses to make, but he can't actively tour with us. So this person now is no longer in this band because that's the decision they made. And so it's little things like that that do kind of make me wonder that it's like, okay, I've been hearing people are like, when everyone was posting like their card of like, oh, I got the vaccine or whatever, people were, digitally manipulating those and making their own to then be like, yep, me too, even though they didn't. Because it's sort of that FOMO thing of like, well, I don't want to get it because it goes against whatever beliefs I may have, but I also don't want to be told I can't go do these things because I didn't do the thing that everyone else did to allow us to go back to a semblance of normal, going to shows, whatever. And so I took that when I read it this morning, the thing that Vince from Metal Sucks kind of posted, that it was like, in theory, because of those things, those avenues of like, you can't literally ask people, like I work door at a bar. Someone was like, oh, I'm vaccinated. And I was like, I can't ask you that anyway. Like legally, I can't ask you, like, you can only come in here if you're vaccinated. Like, I can't ask you that. That's part of like our HIPAA and all that kind of stuff, laws and so forth. Mm-hmm. It's all in good faith, essentially. And you would like to hope that people, especially after being isolated and not being able to do these things that bring us together, and concerts and music doing that, you would hope that everyone would be on the up and up and try to do things for the greater good of all of us. But I know just from human nature and history, like that's not always the case. People will do what they want to selfishly, because they feel they're entitled to it or whatever. So with that being said, potentially, especially with secondary strains that, we're hearing about now of the secondary COVID-19 of, I forget what the term is that they're calling it, that there could be another strain, and then all starts again and touring goes away very quickly. We're all kind of at a, the whole point of everything, getting to 70%, I think in most states, is the herd immunity kind of thing. But we don't know if that's what's going to happen. There's so much more I could talk about on this, because like I worked for a little bit at one of the companies here in town that made one of the vaccines, and even working for a company that made one, there was still like some of the rules that were in place at my job didn't make any fucking sense. Like I went to go train. Our training was in our break room. As someone training, I had to wear a mask all day, but the people who were coming up to eat lunch or take their breaks, that was the one area they could not wear it. And I'm like, and so one day I just stopped wearing the mask there, and they're like, you have to wear it. I go, let's look at this logically. Why do I have to wear a mask in an area when I'm already sitting and I'm sitting by myself away from everyone because everything's been distanced, but 30 people can come up here and then take off their mask? I don't really understand if this is like the safe haven of where you can do that, why it matters what I'm doing versus what they're doing. It's the same space.
Yeah, we could dive into a lot of this.
There's things like that like it's common sense to a degree.
I would say so. They're just for our tour, right? They're for Dance Gavin Dance, they're making sure that everybody's vaccinated.
Okay.
In order to step on stage in New York, you have to be vaccinated.
That's part of it, and I don't want to get like too inside your shit there, but is that something that literally the state of New York and or the venue that you're playing, that is part of your condition of the agreement upon, here's your contract, and this is before you even step forward, either you have to all submit your paperwork ahead of time, or
you just have to show your card at the door to go in. But yes, it is part of the contractual agreement. I believe New York's the only state that's mandating that, right?
That's interesting.
But it's heavily encouraged, right? But at the end of the day, I do think that if this is again a personal opinion here, if your goal is to get as many people vaccinated as possible, you should focus on the efficacy of the vaccine itself, right? Is it effective or isn't it? So if it's effective, then people who are vaccinated should have nothing to worry about. Whether that's a new strain, whether that's the regular COVID, I guess, not the Delta variant. Like if you're vaccinated, you shouldn't have anything to worry about in those environments, right? And I think that's that really at the end of the day is like what people should take comfort in when they're going out into these shows. It's like, okay, come in good faith. And if you are, and maybe 1 out of the 1,000 people lied about it, right? You're vaccinated. You don't have anything to worry about, right? If it's effective, right? If it's not effective, right, and people keep making the argument that they have something to be scared about, then we will end up in the same situation where it all gets shut down, because then it's a method of social control. It's not good, right? You're not going to get somebody in Montana, in rural Montana, vaccinated with that logic, right? And if your goal is for the greater good of the community, right, then and that's your goal, is to get people vaccinated. I think that the messaging's got to be a lot clearer, and it's got to be less politicized. I think would help. And I think Fauci even said that recently, where he said, we take the politics out of it. I think that's close. I think that needs to be a lot more pushed in the messaging, right? If you're going to get people to take it. So
absolutely. The whole point of that initially, though, was that you guys aren't playing Michigan. I'm actually seeing a lot of bands are skipping Michigan.
That I'm not 100% sure why that is, because New York obviously is like, they're mandating it. So if the goal was to get around mandates, it doesn't really make sense to skip Michigan. I don't really know.
Yeah, I know. I know that has nothing to do with you guys. I know that's like, booking agents and all that kind of stuff. But was just all going to say that you guys are playing the day after my birthday in Chicago, and nice. So I might try to make it out for that.
Come out. We'll hang for sure. We'll grab some burgers again.
Oh, I mean, if I'm coming to Chicago, I'm going to get some.
Oh, we're going pizza. All right, I'm down.
Well, enjoy the rest of the. Oh, actually, the real plug thing. Although we already just talked about how you're not really active on social media, but where can people find the band, or anything you would like to plug for the band online?
Not the best at that. I don't like I said. I'm not only not active, I don't have it. So I don't have it. I don't even have the login information for the Eidola pages. So I have been void of all social media for like almost 3 years. I don't know the exact URLs. Just Google search Eidola and everything will come up. Everybody uses Google. I'm sure you could find it. I will say, idolathearchitect.com is where you can buy anything that you would like to buy for this album. So the vinyl, t-shirts, we've got some more t-shirts coming. We've got some more vinyl variants coming.
Should make some masks.
So with Dan Traub is the maker of the mask. He's awesome. We have something cool with that coming up recently. I know he's already got some business coming his way so far from people ordering the masks. So we'll be doing some collaborations with him in the future too. He's super duper talented. I just found that picture and I was like, I gotta have that for the album. It's just so cool. And he was like, well, I don't own the rights to the picture. It's from this photographer and it's this person. So we all got onto a group thing and we purchased the rights for the photo. But we're like, yeah, we'll tag you and everything. Hopefully you'll get some business. And it looks like he's gotten some business so far. So the masks are awesome. If you get the chance to pick one up, definitely order it from him. He's a super talented guy.
Imagine looking out at a crowd while you're playing and just see like hundreds of those.
Oh, it'd be sick. Yeah. It'd be very sick. So.
Yeah. Well, thanks again for taking the time, and we'll do this again eventually.
Awesome. Thanks, John. Appreciate you, man.
So that was my conversation with Andrew Wells of Eidola and Dance Gavin Dance. It's been really good, actually, hearing him do a few other forms of press, podcasts, whatever. He was recently a guest on the Lead Singer Syndrome podcast of Shane Tolds from Silverstein. That one... It's kind of interesting sometimes, like when I see him do some press, because I know he doesn't do much. So it's always kind of interesting to see what him and somebody else end up getting into and so forth. And there was a little bit more about his status with Dance Gavin Dance that, I didn't necessarily want to get into that, because sometimes when you get into other band things where the person's not technically a member or whatever, it kind of creates some weird tension at times. So I just kind of left a lot of the Dance Gavin Dance stuff out of it. But the Lead Singer Syndrome podcast episode with Andrew was really good. Go check it out if you are inclined after listening to this one. He does not do much in the way of press, like I said earlier, so getting to kind of hear him talk at length about some of the projects between Eidola, working with Gavin, with Tillian, with, Will and all these people, and just kind of his experiences, I think kind of allows you to kind of understand more of who he is. So go check those out. Speaking of check it out, I checked out a shitload of beers this last week. I had some friends in from Oregon, and so I was able to knock out a huge amount of beers because I was able to try them with a bunch of people. One of the ones that stood out to me was a Martin House beer. If you've heard me talk on the podcast, you know that I've become very fascinated, infatuated, however you want to put it, with Martin House. I still don't think I've had a bad beer from them, and this one was no different. It is called the Melted. It's a salted caramel and waffle cone ice cream ale. Holy shit, was this thing mad fucking delicious. It hit on all the flavors, the saltiness of the salty caramel flavor and the waffle cone flavor, and like the little bit of that lactose kind of ice cream flavor. Just, man, this thing was so delicious. I wish I had more of them. It is a phenomenal beer, and it was really great actually getting to try so many different beers with my friends and just kind of, having conversations late at night, very much like this conversation with Andrew. So it's been a lot of fun this last week having my friends in town and gearing up for Atlanta. We just got done seeing Kanye a week ago as of when we're recording this. I will probably end up doing something talking more about that event and the Donda album finally dropping, because a lot of people have been asking me about it. So seems only right that would be something I would do. And kind of wrapping this episode up because it is kind of long. If you would like to keep up with Eidola, it's Eidola UT on Facebook and Eidola on Instagram and Twitter. Andrew doesn't have any social media, so I don't have to plug that. If you would like to keep up with us, it's simple enough. BREWspeakPod.com is the landing page. You will find everything you need to know about us, including our sponsors. And I want to take a moment to thank them again real quick. The Bean Bastard. Go to thebeanbastard.com, get you some delicious coffee, support the guys and gals in the brick and mortar in Buffalo, New York, if you're around the area. Head on over to rockabilia.com. They have over 500,000 items in their online store. You can use our code BREWtally and get 10% off your total purchase order. And last but not least, last week's guest, Mr. Matty Mullins of Memphis Mayfire and On Point Pomade. Use our code BSP15 and take 15% off your total purchase order. And last but not least, our Patreon. We are doing so much with the Patreon. Head on over to patreon.com/BrewspeakPod. For as little as $1, you'll get a couple of videos, the sidecast, what I learned from a podcast. I do weekly breakdown videos of my weekly playlist, and I also have been doing posting all the episodes basically before I do them. So right now there's an episode I did with Eric Martin of Mr. Big that's already up over there. Everything you want to see or hear is already over there. So for a fee, you can go check that out and get early access to these episodes. For the BREWtally Speaking Podcast, all the shilling aside, I am John. And I'll talk to you next week, where our guest is Sean Cooper of Taking Back Sunday and Stray Light Run. I'll talk to you then.
Oh, that fucking sucked. Shao Kahn, what'd you think?
That was pathetic.
Yeah. Coach, what'd you think?
Fucking embarrassing!
Okay. I mean, I knew it was gonna fucking suck, but I think those guys were a little rude. Austin Powers?
How about new?
Okay, I thought we were going to get the Austin Powers vote. We did not. John, use that for your podcast. It fucking sucks. But you knew what you were getting into. It will result in less listens. You're going to see a decline in listeners if you start the show with that. You're going to see 30 seconds in, the number will plummet. And I will be there at the bottom of the plummet saying, I fucking told you, don't use this fucking riff. It sucks.